With that Saturday game, Tampa Bay can get themselves into the playoffs if they can pull out a win over the Lions. We had our distant cousin, Gerald McCoy, on the show just yesterday talking about his old team, how he still identifies with them, how he's a Buccaneer for life, and he even had some advice.
They got to let Tom do what Tom does, what he's made his career doing, which is play action, motions, things of that sort. Because once he run the ball, gotta run the ball. Stick to the run.
Yeah.
If you give Tom Brady a run game, opens up the play action, and they'll kill you. They got too many weapons, man. So I believe when they're hitting on all cylinders, they are one of the most complete teams in the league. And they can make a run, but they got to get back to doing what makes them great. Let Tom do what Tom does.
Okay, let Tom do what Tom does. The Bucs are in that 6th seed in the NFC, not quite where we thought they'd be in the offseason. Kyle, should any of the power teams, the elite ones in the NFC, fear a matchup with these Buccaneers in the playoffs?
Well, the only thing to fear right now is you have to hear that Paul McCartney Christmas song one more time. Just one more time. No one is having a wonderful Christmas time listening to that tripe. However, to answer your question, Kay, listen, the AFC playoffs, AFC's got dogs in it. The AFC playoffs are going to be crazy because everybody can throw huge punches. I look at the NFC. Should any of these teams really be above fearing anyone? I will give the Saints a pass against the Buccaneers based on what they've done to them. But let's just look at the Packers for a second. The juggernaut Packers. You want to fear the Buccaneers? I don't love this team. I've tried. You fear this. You fear their apex powers in which they, for one reason, for one day, for whatever reason, they looked like the best team on the planet against Green Bay. They destroyed them. And if you remember what happened to Green Bay last year against San Francisco, they got destroyed, and they saw them in the playoffs, and they got destroyed. You fear the defense. You respect Brady. But I would just look around the NFC at some of these teams the Bucs might face. Who is going to be so much better than them? I mean, they could face the Bears. The Bears lost 6 games in a row. Seattle lost to Colt McCoy. Seattle almost lost to Dwayne Haskins before he lost to Spearmint Rhino. And worse, the Rams lost to the Jets. So who is not going to just roll over the Buccaneers? It might be wide open. It might be wide open. I don't love this Bucs team. They've not turned into a juggernaut right before our eyes. I've tried since April. But they can still knock off these teams because the NFC, I think, is open. I really do.
You're spot on, KB, and it's just having one-punch power. And they do have that. And listen, one-punch power doesn't come in the form of a running game all of the time. Maybe it comes in the form of what happens after the running game gets going. It's just like Gerald McCoy said, if they can run the ball, they can throw the ball. And some of the passes that we've seen this year, some of those deep shots downfield have come off of the running game. When you look at Tom Brady, especially this one, this was a surprising shot down the field to Antonio Brown, who struggled to find his rhythm with this offense. But you see guys like that starting to make plays. Of course, we know when Mike Evans gets going, Chris Godwin, and the big tight ends. If these guys can catch the balls downfield, oh, and shout out to Scotty Miller, that's what's going to help this team. Forget about Tom Brady just nickel and diming and working in between the numbers and keeping everything intermediate. Tom still has the accuracy and the arm to throw downfield. So I could care less about how inconsistent they have been this year. They are finding their rhythm at the right time. And if they can hand the ball off and run it consistently and then take those shots down the field on the sideline and down the middle, they'll be good to go. All of a sudden, this team is starting to look like what Tom Brady wanted it to look like. Run game that opens up the pass game.
It's interesting because they came out of the bye week and they beat Minnesota, which was essentially a playoff game for both teams. And then they beat Atlanta last week in a fashion that you might say, yeah, but why couldn't they get started? Why were they down early? Like, what's going on with Minnesota with that game? The fact that they came back, the fact that they were doing that, it looked sort of vintage Brady, and that's what would scare me if I'm these other teams in the NFC. Because once that playoff season starts,
here we go.
If this, and I know this was my biggest concern about Brady going into the season, that he's 43 years old in a new offense with a new coach. And it feels like, just get me to the playoffs and let's roll with this guy, because no one has been there more than him. No one has more experience than him. And I feel like if it's a wide open NFC, and Kyle, to your point, when you wax the Packers, but then on the back end, you lose to the Rams in the regular season, you lose to the Saints twice, and of course you lost to the Bears on a Thursday night where Khalil Mack was just absolutely destroying your entire offensive line. it feels like there is no consistency on any of these teams. That like the Bucs, I don't know, they might lose to the Falcons 9 out of 10 games, or they come back from 24-7 and Brady's hitting Antonio Brown for a game-winning touchdown. I look at the slate, I wouldn't want to face Brady because I just know that he's been there before, and I don't think they're getting worse. I think they're getting better as the season is ending up.
See, I don't feel that way. Sure, I feel like they have knockout power. I will agree with that. But do you see them stringing together 3 wins against the best of the NFC and making it to the Super Bowl? Like, can they knock someone out and ruin it? Yes, but I'm still wrapped on this thing that it's Brady and it's Belichick and they needed each other. Now, the Patriots are out of it. I don't know. I have to see it before I believe it. The inconsistency and the fact, Shchangers, that they've only beaten one team with a winning record all year, which is, that's a little absurd if you look at their schedule. Granted, of course, they have to play who they play. But Shchangers, do you see them stringing together wins at this point in the season when you're saying they've gotten a lot better from where they started against the Saints week 1?
Well, look, I mean, that second half last week could have been the catalyst they needed. We've waited 4 months for it, but suddenly they were lights out. And Antonio Brown was catching screen passes and going, and then the deep pass to Brown. Like, to me, it's who's ascending going into the playoffs. Look at their record right now. They're 1 game back of the Saints. You know, it's not like they're an 8-8 team. So to me, I think that the Buccaneers are a squad with Brady, with Gronk, with all those guys that I don't necessarily want to see. I wouldn't want to see Brady across the way in the playoffs.
They're not consistent, but you are, Peter. We're showing David Patton and Leonard Little at 7:06 a.m. Eastern. Peter, you're beautiful. But to answer that question, too, the follow-up, like, it's the fear factor, right? Are you actually afraid of them? Are you afraid of them like eating hissing cockroaches on NBC with Joe Rogan? No, and yet every once in a while, and I don't mean months ago against the Packers, last week, what Devin White was doing, are you kidding me? Do you want to face that defense? They just unleashed hell out of nowhere. And it's like you said, knockout power, but I also think it's more than that. I think it's just a big right hand. They don't always throw it, but I would take that one-punch power over some of these. Let's be honest. Some of these playoffs teams, the NFC, are not great. They just punched their ticket. They're going to get in. They're not playing terribly well, but they're in. I would take the one-punch power over a team that's just kind of nice to be there.
And Kyle, some of these playoff teams are going to freeze up like deers in the headlights. As soon as they get there, all this hype we've seen all season long, they're not going to have it in the playoffs. And let me be very clear. I think we all understand this as well. How many times has Brady walked his way into the playoffs, then all of a sudden the criticism and the doubt kicked in? This is a familiar setting for Tom Brady. Every single year it was something, whether it was his age, his coaching staff, coaches leaving, a guy being hurt, a superstar being down. It didn't matter. Brady loves this. So if you continue to criticize him and doubt him, he's going to use this as fuel. And don't be surprised if we're all watching a Super Bowl in Tampa and Mr. Tom Brady, or shall I say Tampa Brady.
Whoa. Wow, Burleson. At GMFB, yesterday, Mike Garafolo, Kyle renamed our show Good Morning Strip Club. You just dropped a Spearmint Rhino reference at 7 in the morning Eastern, 4 in the morning out on the West Coast. So let's talk
Strip
about
me
it.
of my captaincy.
Tom Pelissero, our NFL Network insider here. We talked, Tom, about Dwayne Haskins without a mask at a strip club after their loss to the Seahawks. What is the latest with the Washington QB sitch?
Okay, the Washington football team fined Dwayne Haskins $40,000 and stripped him of his captaincy after those unmasked photos with strippers surfaced on social media following last week's loss to the Seahawks. This is at least the second time that Haskins has been disciplined this season for violating COVID protocols. He also was fined a couple of months ago for bringing an unauthorized visitor into a hotel. But Haskins was on the field for practice yesterday after Washington worked with the league. He's continued to test negative for COVID-19. And Coach Ron Rivera said that if Alex Smith can't go against the Panthers, it would be Haskins in the starting lineup for a big game as Washington continues to try to make a playoff push. As for Smith, he was officially listed as limited in practice as he continues to try to come back from that calf strain. And one other important note, Haskins apologized and clarified he was not in a strip club. He was at a private party with strippers, which is the first and only time perhaps that anyone has actually tried to use that excuse to get away with anything.
Private club. No, I think I've had ex-boyfriends use that excuse before. It didn't work though. Tom Pelissero, thank you. Talk to you.
Wouldn't fly here
on NFL Network. Keep it here. Yeah, wouldn't fly. No fly zone with that one. Okay, Christmas Day. Nothing says Christmas like strip club talk. Let's talk.